Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We've got multiple news items in today's episode, including a look at the Chris Buescher penalty and how it's just part of a much bigger story at RFK Racing this year that's quite the ugly one for team co-owner Brad Keselowski. We'll discuss the interesting remarks from Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kevin Harvick on his Happy Hour podcast regarding NASCAR's broken developmental system. And I'll explain why Chase Elliott fans aren't happy with the most recent move by Hendrick Motorsports. We'll also have a preview of the upcoming All-Star Race weekend at North Wilkesboro and take a quick look back at last year's race, which I was fortunate and had the opportunity to attend. Plus, we're a third of the way through the season, and because I featured the Daniel Suarez interview in Wednesday's video, we'll wrap up with our By the Numbers segment. However, before we start crunching the numbers, let's go back to yesterday's big news on the big penalty to Chris Buescher. Since early in the week, rumors have been swirling around something big happening with the number 17 car. Well, yesterday, NASCAR confirmed those rumors, announcing a major penalty for the number 17 team for violations of sections 14.1.c, overall assembled vehicle rules, and 14.5.4.g, the front bumper cover. The team was docked $75,000, but the bigger penalty was the loss of 60 owner points, 60 driver points, and 5 NASCAR playoff driver and owner points. In addition, crew chief Scott Graves will be suspended for the next 2 NASCAR Cup Series events through Charlotte Motor Speedway. The news was obviously bad for Buescher, but for the bigger overarching theme, it was another ugly blight on a season full of them for RFK owner Brad Keselowski. You could call Keselowski's season horrible, and even that would be an understatement. How bad has it been? Take a look at this graphic, courtesy of my friend Joel Steuben, and you can see the 2012 Cup Series champion has looked like anything but a champ in 2025, not recording a single top 10 through the first dozen races. More disturbingly for number 6 fans, he's recorded just 4 top 20s all year and has 9 finishes of 26th or worse. What makes these numbers even more surprising is when you compare them to what Keselowski did just a year ago through the first dozen races, when he had 5 top 10s, 4 of them inside the top 5, including a pair of runner-up results at Texas and Talladega. I guess when looking at the 2024 numbers and how they might translate to 2025, there's hope for Brad's fans. He won the 13th race of the season last year at Darlington. We'll see what happens in a little over a week in the 13th race of 2025 at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the Coca-Cola 600. A place where he's won twice before, including in 2020. Moving on to our next story, and I was listening to Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast this week and his interview with Dale Earnhardt Jr. The Cars Tour co-owners were getting together to talk about the upcoming weekend at North Wilkesboro, with the Cars Tour and both of them working the broadcast for Flow Racing and FS1, which will air tonight. In their conversation, they discussed NASCAR's developmental system. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I think a lot of drivers risk not developing into their true potential because they rush to get there.
Yeah.
And they don't have quite enough people at that level, at the Cup level, to truly believe in them and stay with them to get to that point. I mean, Joey could easily not be a 3-time Cup champion.
Very easily.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value, I think, in being patient. You know, the only problem is that it's a money game, right? And it's all, for almost everyone, it's pay to play. And if you got the money, you got to go, right? The finances that are behind the driver often dictate the speed in which they move through the ranks, and sometimes they're not able to take the time that they need. But I feel like that you could spend. I always felt this way. You could spend at least 2 years in each level, like 2 years in the car store, 2 years in the trucks, 2 years in Xfinity to truly get to where you need to be before you get to the Cup level. But sometimes drivers just don't have that luxury because of how much of the big machine behind them is pushing them forward. Maybe they don't have the time to be able to wait. But
you think it's broke? I mean, do you think the development system's broke?
Well,
I feel like it's broke. And I feel like I look at iRacing.
Yeah.
I had an interesting conversation with Joey from NASCAR about a point system, kind of like iRacing. If you don't have enough points at this level, you can't go to this level.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough points at this level, and I feel like that if we made that Cup piece of it harder to get to,
yes,
it would make it more prestigious, but it would also get more guys the opportunity to go there that have the right path.
Yeah.
Do we need to make some sort of system like that?
You know, there was this process that was clunky and not really perfect. Honestly, the best scenario might be a bit of a driver's committee at the cup level. There should be a driver committee that votes on the people that are entering these races.
Yeah.
When you know, when you went to Darlington, you had to have a rookie orientation as a driver. Even AJ Foyt had to go through that to be accepted. And the drivers were the ones sitting and watching that practice and saying, this guy's ready, this guy is not ready.
Right.
And so maybe at each level, you know, there's a group of 3 or 4 drivers that are the ones that determine if somebody is eligible or should be eligible for whatever race.
It does make you wonder if NASCAR will ever change it. Some of you might be thinking this is a familiar conversation. That's because it is. We talked about this very subject earlier this year and how it's created nothing but confusion with the example of Catherine Legg and her debut in the Cup Series. Moving on to our next story, and that was the news that came out yesterday about a pit crew member change for Chase Elliott's number 9 team. Elliott fans remember that the number 9 car was strong in Kansas last weekend, finishing second behind Kyle Larson in both stages and in a really good position running up near the front late in the race until a pit stop in that third stage and trouble on the right rear wheel ruined the 2020 champ's day. He finished 15th. Yesterday, Bob Pockrass reported that the rear tire changer would be changed, and it was an interesting swap because it was once again Hendrick Motorsports taking one of its loaned out pit crew members from Justin Haley's number 7 crew. Well, guess what? That number 7 rear tire changer had just been swapped over from Kyle Larson's crew last month. Unsurprisingly, Chase Elliott fans weren't happy about it, basically suggesting that Elliott is getting Kyle Larson's scraps. I can understand their perspective, but I really can sympathize with Justin Haley's fans because of the fact that his pit crew has gone through multiple changes this year, including the swapping out with the number 5 crew, which was obviously one of several reasons why Rodney Childers decided to part ways with Spire Motorsports. Now, let's move on to the upcoming All-Star Race at North Wilkesboro and the 0.625 mile speedway this weekend, including 5 fun facts. For you Brad K fans, this isn't a fun fact, but an interesting one. He has finished runner-up 3 times in the All-Star Race and is tied with Sterling Marlin and Ken Schrader for the most second-place finishes in the event without winning. Conversely, Kyle Larson has won the All-Star Race 3 of the last 6 years. His 3 All-Star wins are tied for second most to Jimmy Johnson with 4. Hendrick Motorsports drivers won the All-Star Race 3 of the last 5 years, while Team Penske won the other 2. Toyota is winless in the last 7 All-Star races. Chevrolet won 4 of the last 7, with Ford winning the other 3. And finally, each of the last 9 All-Star Race winners are also NASCAR Cup champions. Sticking with North Wilkesboro for a moment, and while I won't be attending this year's event, I have fond memories from my visit there last year. Despite torrential rains and lots of mud, it was so cool to go watch a race in the Carolina foothills on a track so rich with history. Just an absolutely beautiful setting that was made even cooler because of this. Yeah, you guessed it, that's Kyle Larson choppering in from Indy. I'm guessing fans will get to enjoy a similar scene this weekend. And finally, since I included the Daniel Suarez interview in Wednesday's video, we didn't get to do our By the Number segment. We'll do that now, and it's a significant one because we're at the third of the way through the 2025 campaign. However, before we do that, I want to revisit last weekend's race at Kansas and start by taking a look at the race progression graphs. Remember, all of these graphics can be viewed on stube.com. We're going to start with the top 5 finishers, and the one that certainly sticks out the most is the performance of Chase Briscoe and the number 19 team. He started in the middle of the field, dropped way back, and then steadily made his way up and finished 4th. While we've got a pair of HMS cars in this one, now let's take a look at the team's graph, and it's obviously a painful one for Chase Elliott fans, as we've discussed in that story a few minutes ago, and William Byron. Both had strong days going until they didn't, or as we call it, racing. Let's stick with the theme of talking about teams we've already mentioned in this video, and we'll go to RFK Racing. Sorry, Brad K fans. His race progression looked so promising all the way into that third stage, and then the blown tire happened. Now let's take a look at Joe Gibbs Racing, and I think what sticks out to me is the consistency of Christopher Bell. The number 20 car never dropped below 6th the entire race. Ty Gibbs dropped like a rock, and Denny Hamlin had a decent day going until that third stage. And lastly, since I interviewed Daniel Suarez, let's take a look at Trackhouse and you can see what he talked about in Wednesday's interview. How the team had a good qualifying effort and it was all downhill from there. The other thing of note is SVG got his second top 20 on an oval this year. And now let's move over to our last 5 races analysis, and it's an interesting one because we've got some shuffling at the top. Moving into the top spot after being ranked 4th last week is Kyle Larson, with an average finishing position of 9.0. Since Darlington, the number 5 team has been stellar. Holding down the same second spot he was in last week is William Byron with an AFP of 9.6, and he is followed by Ryan Blaney, who moved up from 6th in last week's numbers with an AFP of 10.6. Looking at the 2023 champs last 5, and he has that lone blemish at Talladega. Ross Chastain, who was at the top in last week's analysis, is 4th, and Seabell holds down the same 5th spot where he was a week ago with an AFP of 11.4. Similar to Blaney, Talladega was the only race in the last 5 where he didn't record a strong finish. Others of note in this week's analysis include Austin Cindric, who moves inside the top 10 at 7th. Last week, he was number 18, but outside of Texas, he's been solid in his last 5, including his win at Talladega. Austin Dillon slots in right behind at number 8 with a pair of finishes in the top 20s, sandwiching his stretch of 3 consecutive top 10s. Dillon's RCR teammate Kyle Busch has had some struggles in his last 3 races, finishing 20th or worse in all 3. And lastly, or almost lastly in this case, Brad Keselowski's result at Kansas was just a microcosm of his season and the last 5 races. He's second to last in this week's standings with an abysmal AFP of 30 even, with only Cody Ware behind him. Ouch! All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to get your thoughts. First, for you RFK Racing and Brad K fans, tell me what you're feeling. I know it can't be good. And what about the comments of Kevin Harvick and Dale Jr. on NASCAR's broken developmental system? Do you like Jr.'s proposed solution? And for you Chase Elliott fans, let me know what you think about the pit crew member swap and getting a castaway from the number 5 team. And finally, let me know what you guys thought about the By the Numbers segment, including the race progression graphs and our last 5 races analysis. Any surprises in there for you? Thanks again for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the race weekend from North Wilkesboro. We'll see you on Monday.